All right, I see a lot of people are coming on. Okay, make sure everyone can hear me. Maybe someone can put in the chat. I can hear you. I'm sitting outside because it's kind of nice. Anyone on? Okay, great. Ashley says you can hear me. Perfect. So hopefully I've kind of like started to get potentially my 6-year-old's cold last night, but I feel like I might be okay. But if I start to clear my throat or do any funny noises, my hair is doing something funny too. You guys will know why. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started in 2 more minutes. I'm really, really excited about this training. I haven't actually done much. Yeah, I haven't really done much educational information targeted specifically towards the more Chinese medicine aspect of how I work with clients. So I'm really excited about this. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and I think it's really what makes me stand out compared to a lot of other online gut health experts or functional medicine practitioners, just online health experts in general. So, so during it's going to be very laid back, just so you guys know. I didn't create slides for this. I think you got the email. I said I had this like great webinar presentation scheduled with slides and all this, and I'm like, don't really feel like that doing that. I'm just gonna do a kind of more laid back training on how the emotions impact our health, because that's just what I felt called to do. So you guys can ask questions, and I'll just, there's not going to be a designated Q&A time. I'm just going to kind of go through the content. If there's questions that come up while I'm talking, you can ask them, and I may answer them as I go along, or I might come back to them. But again, very laid back, and I love interaction. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Nancy Kroll. I'm a doctor of Oriental medicine, and I help women heal from chronic health conditions, which often include low energy, weight issues, or mental, psycho-emotional issues such as anxiety or depression, through a unique approach of combining both Eastern and Western medicine. So I do this through gut health and hormone balance, and then a huge part of it, which is what we're going to be diving into, is the emotions and how they impact our belief systems and how that shows up in our health. So we only have an hour. I have a firm ending that is going to be at 1 p.m. Mountain. But I'm hoping that you guys can get enough information that you get, a better understanding of how this all works together. All right, so what I wanted to do is I did want to do one screen share just because, hold on, it is easier to imagine the 5 elements when you can see them. So hold on, let me just pull that up. Some of you may already be familiar. Oops, cannot close that. All right, see if I can screen share this. Okay, great. Sorry, there's all this other stuff in the background. My embarrassing screen here. Gotta clean off my desktop. Okay, let's see if it's a bit, maybe we can make it bigger. There we go. Hide that. Okay, there we go, guys. So here is the 5 elements. So we have, I guess before we dive into it, I'm going to just talk about what are the 5 elements, why they're important. So Chinese medicine in its root is actually based off of Taoism, Taoism, right? It's called the Tao. And a lot of people think Taoism is a religion. It's actually not necessarily a religion. It is a belief system. It's a way of just viewing life. So you can practice the Tao or practice the 5 elements, and it's not like you can't be another religion, right? You can actually just utilize this information for your benefit. So be open and receiving to it. So hold on, someone asked a question. I just want to make sure it's not. Okay, I'll come back to that, Brandy. So historically, the people who created this mind, this way of looking at life, it's through years and centuries of basically looking at patterns in life. Life is a set of patterns in how the seasons change, how health patterns arise, and once you're in tune with these patterns, it gives you this special ability to live in harmony, right? So it's like living in harmony with the Tao. It's Wu Wei. It's like being fluid, right? And it's really difficult, I think, for the modern person to do that because we have this false sense of control. We're not living in connection with Mother Nature anymore. We're living in these little heated boxes, and we get in our heated car to go to another heated box, and there's this really massive disconnection to our outside world. And then on top of it, I think it just compounds this feeling that like we can control everything, right? And in reality, there's this kind of symbiotic relationship that happens between our will and then also the energy around us, right? So there has to be this flow. So that's kind of the basic principle. And then within that belief system are these 5 elements, and then also yin and yang theory. I'm not going to go deep into what yin and yang is, but you can see it here, that symbol behind the star. And it's basically this, it symbolizes light and dark, but also it also just proves how everything is relative to everything else. It's not like things are black and white. Everything, like right now, I feel like life is becoming very polarized on every scale. And that's just not how life is. Everything is relative rather than this like firm polarization. So nothing fits neatly into a box. It's all relative to something else. So let's kind of just go into what these 5 elements are, and then I'm going to talk about how I feel like this shows up in your health. Okay, so here we'll start with autumn, the metal element, because that's where we are right now, if you're in the northern hemisphere. And the element of metal is associated with the lungs and the large intestine. So each of the elements has an organ system that it's associated with. Some of these are going to translate into what you think of when you think of these organs, and some of them I'm going to have to kind of open up your mindset around it, because you have to realize that this medicine is thousands of years old, and so they had different ways of describing things as well. So lung and large intestine, it's literally lung and large intestine. The climate is dry, taste is pungent. So everything basically in life is a microcosm and macrocosm and can be broken down into these elements. So the pungent flavor is associated with the metal element, the emotion of grief, the nose, and the skin. So this is why, if you have some issue going on in your lung and large intestine, it'll manifest in the skin. So if you have any skin disorders, where do you got to look? The gut, right? So Chinese medicine has known this way before functional medicine, which I love. Now we have Western science backing up these ancient modalities. So I'm going to go through all of them, and then we'll come back to each of the emotions. So water element is associated with winter. The organs are the kidney and bladder. The climate is cold. The taste is salty. The emotion is fear. The sense organ are the ears, and it governs the bones. Okay. Wood is the spring. It's the liver and gallbladder. The climate is wind. Oh my God, if you guys ever visit Santa Fe in the spring, you will feel the wind. The taste is sour. The emotion is anger or frustration, and that is definitely an emotion that rises for me with all that wind. Sense organ is the eyes, and it governs the tendons. And then summer, the element is fire. The yin organ is the heart. The yang organ is the small intestine. It also has another set of organs, the pericardium and the sanjiao, which I'm not going to go into because I think it's a little bit too esoteric, but we'll stay with those heart and small intestine. The climate is hot. Taste is bitter. The emotion is joy. Tongue is the sense organ, and it governs the vessels, so like blood vessels. Okay. And then late summer. So this is very interesting. So earth element. So we see it here kind of in this sequence of 5, like the energy flows around. So it can be considered late summer, but the earth element is also considered the season between seasons. So the transition between autumn and winter, winter and spring, there's kind of this in between is also governed by the earth element. And oftentimes in something like the Bagua, or like the Bagua, or what is it called, Feng Shui, you'll see this earth actually in the center of this, and you'll see the other 4 elements around it. And that's because this element is actually considered the pivot point and considered very important for harmony in the body and everything else. So it's the earth element. The associated organs are spleen and stomach. Spleen can also kind of be translated as pancreas, outside of also the physical spleen. The climate is damp. Taste is sweet. The emotion is worry. The sense organ is the mouth, and it governs the muscles. Okay. So this is the basis of our 5 elements, right? And the reason why, so let me kind of just go back a little bit and just say, I'm going to take this off for just a minute. Oh, hi, Kathleen from Seattle. So let me just go back and say, in Chinese medicine, and actually all of ancient medicine, so Ayurveda has this belief, well, Ayurveda is more in the digestion, which you can see, Ayurveda believes the root of health is the digestion, which is also a similar belief when you utilize that kind of framing of having the earth element in the center. But in Chinese medicine, the belief is that the emotions are the root of health. So I think I said in that email I showed you guys, it's like emotions, then herbs, then diet, then moxa, which if you're not familiar with moxa, it's burning mugwort on your skin, which is an herb, and then acupuncture, right? So it's like, it's the internal and then it's the external in terms of order of importance of health. And so often, even within Eastern medicine, people, I think it's easy to fall into this like 3D paradigm that we need to fix the physical in order to fix the symptom. And it is the case in a lot of ways. Like, it is important to have the herbs and the diet and all this and the lifestyle correct. But if you don't actually address the emotional aspect of the imbalance, it doesn't shift. There is a reason why this health pattern has come up for you, unless you were literally just in some like car accident, it was like a fluke trauma. But even then, if the trauma lingers, there's an emotional component to it. So really understanding this emotional aspect of healing is an imperative part of the healing process. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my notes. I love how I like the fact I don't have slides, you guys, because it feels like we're just hanging out. Okay. All right. Put my notes over here. Okay. So I don't know how many of you have a meditation practice, but I had this epiphany one time at a Vipassana, which is a 10-day meditation retreat type thing. I don't know if it's considered a retreat. Some people might consider it like the jail sentence, but I love them. Okay. But I had this epiphany during one of these Vipassanas of how the practice of unattachment, this Buddhist principle, again, you don't have to be Buddhist to, utilize this information, but this principle of unattachment is actually the fundamentals of health. Okay. So let me go back just a second to this image, because I think this is important. So here we go. So let's just go to the emotional aspect of this. So here's fear, here's anger, here's here's joy, here's worry, and here's grief. Okay. We as human beings should be experiencing the fullness of this human experience, which is actually to experience all of these emotions. Okay. It is healthy to experience fear. It is healthy to experience anger. It is healthy to experience joy. It is healthy to experience worry. And it's healthy to experience grief. Okay. But what happens is a few different things. So in early life, in early childhood, we could have grown up in a situation where potentially anger wasn't expressed, like it wasn't considered a healthy emotion. No one expressed it. It was repressed within our family situation. So therefore, we grew up believing that anger was a bad thing and therefore we shouldn't experience it. Right? Or it could be the opposite. We could have grown up in an abusive, like a emotionally or physically abusive situation, and therefore that scarred us in our relationship to anger, right? And so that could have brought up, maybe we are angry people as a result, or maybe we don't experience anger as a result, right? It could go either way. So the same to do with like worry. Like I feel like my stepdad, like intentionally, if you're watching this, I love you. There's nothing bad against you, but some of us grow up in situations where we're taught, like when we worry about someone, that's actually showing that we care about them, right? And we might lack personal boundaries as a result, or put other people's needs. So some of this is early life programming. Some of it is experiential, right? But a lot of this is from early life. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit deeper into these in just a minute, but I want to talk about how these flow. So in an ideal world, we want to be flowing through these emotions. I don't know how many of you have had children, or at least been around a young child, let's say under the age of 2. Okay, because I think, they start to pick up on other things after the age of 2. But if you ever see like a little toddler, they can be like really scared, and then they're angry, and then they're laughing, and then they're worried, and then they're crying, all within a matter of like 20 minutes. They can experience that full spectrum as if that previous emotion never happened, right? It's just this flow of emotion. They express it fully. There's no holding back. And through life, we kind of tend to repress that. I'm not saying that we should all go around throwing tantrums and screaming when things don't go our way. However, we can look at these small people and see the health in that, right? There's this full expression of the emotion without lingering on it, versus me, I'm still struggling to let go of anger from like 8 years ago when, someone hurt my feelings. I mean, as humans, as adults, we tend to hold on to things, right? Because we create this story and this meaning around it, and it's like there's this like intensity around it, right? It makes it like, it puts it into the 3D, right? It puts it into our bodies. We're like really holding on to it. And health really is this flow of emotion. It's allowing the emotion to arise without clinging to it. And so in Chinese medicine terms, we call it stagnation. We do not want there to be a stagnation of emotion. We want to allow ourselves to experience the emotion, and then that's it. Like we experienced it, and that we got what we needed from it, because each of these emotions actually has a powerful message for us. So we get the message, we experience it, and then we move on, right? But most people are not doing that, right? Let me stop the share. Oops. Stop share. Okay. So most people are not doing that. Most people are, as I said, still repeating behaviors or belief systems or emotional patterns from early life. Most people are still holding on to things and resentments from previous relationships, whatever. So let's talk about the impact of this, right? So let's start with, well, when we have that stagnation, the other thing I wanted to talk about is that's a stress on the body, right? So as soon as we are in stagnation around an emotion, that is essentially non-acceptance. So there is this separation of what is and what is actually happening, and that is essentially stress. You cannot be really in a state of stress whenever you like are allowing yourself to be in whatever is with full acceptance. Okay, so that is, we'll come back to that of like how you guys can navigate emotions. So the fire element, let's go to the fire element, which was associated with summer. So the fire element seemingly seems like not such a bad one. Joy, can we have too much joy? But excessive happiness or overexcitement actually can adversely affect the heart. And it's actually seen as more of like this heightened anxiety. It's like this energy that comes up. It's overjoy. It's almost like a manic energy, right? I don't know if you have ever known anyone that's like manic depressant or something like that. That's the manic aspect of it. And so it's like the other thing that can also happen is whenever we experience joy and then we want to cling to it again, rather than having that appreciation of the joy, we cling to it, and then therefore then there's bitterness around the fact that that is no longer there, right? With the earth element, again, earth element is so big, you guys. I have a whole program, an 8-week program just around the earth element because it's so powerful. And this, like, it's all about anxiety and worry, and this actually impairs digestion. So from the earth element, it's like the overthinking. How many of you guys go to bed ruminating, right? That's like laying there and playing over things over and over in your head, right? So the opposite of this would be trust, right? If you trusted the process, there wouldn't be this rumination, right? And again, it's coming back to experiencing what is in that moment. The metal element, grief. So we are in the metal element, and I don't know if I think I've been sharing with my current clients. The metal element in myself have this like long ongoing relationship because I've had an imbalance in the metal element for a long time. So those of you that have been following me for a long time know that the reason I even got into health over 15 years ago was due to my skin. So it was due to acne, which is a metal imbalance essentially, right? And it's how I started to move into gut health, because I knew that gut was, the large intestine was associated with the skin, long story short. But from an emotional level, I feel like when we're on our healing journey, we're constantly removing layer upon layer upon layer. I don't really have that physical manifestation of the metal element now, but now what's coming to the surface are metal element is all about, grief, but doesn't have to be grief around, oftentimes when we think about grief, we think about a loved one dying, but it can also just be the grief of letting go of what's no longer serving us and having the self-worth in order to do that, right? Because if we don't have self-worth, we're not going to actually let go of those things that are no longer serving us. And so again, having integrity is part of the metal element. and we might experience grief or sorrow. And these all have a symbiotic relationship with each other. You can kind of see if one of them isn't working, the whole flow isn't going to work either, right? And then water is the kidneys and fear and loneliness, and it depletes our vital essence. So when I think about the water, it's like that, it's faith. It's having that deep, deep sense of faith and knowing that everything is going to be okay, right? It is that stillness. It's like surrender. It is like shavasana at the end of a yoga practice. It is just that complete letting go and knowing that you're going to be completely held, right? And again, depending on programming and depending on childhood experiences, these things don't necessarily come easily. And then wood is, like I said already, anger. So anger makes chi rise, so it makes energy rise. So when you have a lot of anger, people have a lot of headaches or issues with the upper part of their body, dizziness, red blotches in their skin. It affects the head and neck. Anger and resentment. And so, we need to have compassion. So what's interesting about all of these is I mentioned that they all are beneficial, right? So for instance, when we ignore emotions, like I think we're taught in Western culture to repress anything that we don't like push it away, right? So you see this in mainstream medicine of just like treating symptoms and pushing symptoms away. And you also just see this kind of when it comes to emotions, right? So if we're experiencing grief, there's like a fear of like if we were to allow ourselves to feel the grief that we would just like get stuck there. But for me, I've had like some sadness come up recently, and what I realized is in softening into that sadness of areas of my life where I have been settling, right? And that's where the grief comes from, is knowing your worth and seeing what you need to let go of in order to step into that worth, right? And then for the water element, it's like that deep sense of knowing, like deep knowingness that everything's going to be okay. And if you grew up in a situation or you had traumas, past traumas like happen to you, it's also learning to trust yourself, right? Actually trusting that deeper sense of intuition, that deeper knowing that you have. And you might be constantly putting yourself like in situations where you're not trusting yourself, where you're constantly fearfully protecting yourself because you don't trust others and you don't trust yourself. And that creates an energetic, disharmony in your body, right? So all of these are kind of forms of stresses as well. In terms of anger, anger can be so powerful. The anger creates change, right? When we feel angry about something, we take action. When we finally are fed up and frustrated, like a lot of people that become my clients, that's where they finally get to. They're like, F this, right? I'm not going to live with this anymore. I do not deserve to live like this. And anger can, really motivate us to take empowered action. But anger that lingers, when we're constantly angry and just like frustrated but not taking the action step, that really, really does damage on the body, right? And then in terms of like joy, I mean, I feel like so many of us are not living in joy. So it's hard to see what the extreme of joy would be. But it's also just like not having order to our lives, right? That joyful energy can be like chaotic and all over the place. And really just making sure that we're, being method, like having a method that we're following in our journey, and making sure that we're staying out of bitterness, right? Taking responsibility for our lives. And then with the earth element, the anxiety, the worry. This is, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how big this is for so many of my female clients, and male clients too, but so many of my female clients. It is that Mother Teresa syndrome. It is like the martyr that gets so congratulated in our society, like as if we're supposed to give and give and give, and if we give to ourselves, we're selfish, right? And it kind of stems from mother wounds. So mother wounds being like you had a mother that maybe either coddled you or didn't give you what you needed. And that really results in you not having personal boundaries, of being able to be the mother for yourself, right? And so you end up overly focusing on others and denying yourself as a result, right? And so that emotionally affects your health. And then what I wanted to kind of go back to with the metal element is that typically has to do with our father wounds, right? If our fathers did not value us and show us how precious we are, then we can have issues there. What I would really like to do is open this up for questions, because I feel like this is going to go a lot deeper with questions. Because then I can have some context to relate it to, because this can feel very like out there, right? It's like this, I don't know, just like in the ether kind of words, but seeing how we could actually put this into use is going to be really powerful. So Brandy says, is thyroid function associated with emotional imbalance? And so the thing is that we like to think that everything is tit for tat. Like there's like, my son is, I see him on his work, like school assignments, and it's like, match this to this, right? Match that to that. And that's just not how health is. So I don't think that like thyroid equals this imbalance per se, right? But with the thyroid, we consider that, I mean, it really depends on hyper or hypo, right? But when you're thinking about thyroid function and you're looking at the kind of bigger picture of physiologically what's happening, it's low energy, it's hair loss, it's excess weight, we would consider it a chi deficiency. So chi deficiencies typically would be related to either the water element or the earth element. So fear or excess worry, right? Depending on which one. And again, this is going to be so individual. This is the thing, you guys, everything is so individual. But that's largely been confirmed with Western science. So when we're under a constant stress response, if we're in fear or if we're in worry constantly, our body feels like our body is in flight or fight. We're going to have an impaired thyroid function, right? I don't think that you can't really make those same translations, right? It's more of this understanding that if you have these belief systems, if you believe in your heart of hearts that you can't be happy unless everyone around you is happy, right? You have that codependency, you don't have emotional boundaries, you will not get better, right? Well, first of all, you probably wouldn't invest in yourself, right? You're probably just watching things here and there, not taking committed action. So that these are actually the root issues at the end of the day. Does that make sense? But type in the let me know that you guys are still here. But say yes if you understand. Okay. Amy says, would you recommend to heal these emotions, and or what would you recommend to heal these emotions and or beliefs, talk therapy or somatic therapy? So I think you have to really find what works for you. Personally, I have never found talk therapy to be beneficial for me. But if it is beneficial for you, then go for it. The reason why I have not found talk therapy to be beneficial is because for me, it just feels like reliving past traumas. Like it just feels like I'm talking and they're not legally allowed to give recommendations or, anything like that. So it just ends up feeling like me physically um, going back into those traumas or going back into those emotions. And then they're just there. Like it doesn't actually feel like it moves it for me. What I think would be a very powerful exercise for everyone on this call to do, this is something I do with my clients, is to write your superhero story, which means write your victim story and then rewrite it. So what that looks like is we all have a trauma story. We all have our victim story, right? No one's victim story is worse or better than anyone else's because our traumas are very individual and they are unique to us and how they impacted our lives, right? So you don't compare victim stories, but you write it out. Like all, your victim story. It's all that stuff that's on repeat in your mind. It's all of that stuff that like when you think back on your childhood, it was like that thing that like if only that didn't happen, I'd be okay, right? Or whatever. There's when I think back on my life, it's like there's probably like, the max 10, but like, some pivotal things. So you write out that story and then you turn around and you write it from the different mindset. It's like actually owning what a blessing, even the shittiness, and excuse my French, you guys, but some of the stuff that happens to us is really shitty, but they can all be like, they're all to our benefit if we allow it to. So what really separates somebody who thrives in this world and heals and really gets to the other side is their belief system, how they view their experiences and their shift in mindset. That is the differentiating factor. Obviously getting, working with someone that can help you identify some root causes is beneficial as well. But if you don't do both of them, you're not going to get better. You could have the best protocol in the world. And if you still have a shitty mindset or you still are in a victim state, you're not going to heal. And so it's taking that story and like, um, you know, I think I shared this with my clients. I don't know if I've shared it publicly, but I'll just use an example from my life. It's like, my parents divorced when I was 1. I spent part-time with my dad. This is my victim story, okay? Spent part-time with my dad, and he has drug and alcohol. He's a drug addict and alcoholic. So when I was with him, he was highly neglectful and emotionally, not emotionally, more verbally abusive, right? So that's part of my victim story, right? If I stayed in that victim story, that does not actually serve me, right? That actually disempowers me. Now I actually see it as such a like gift, right? Like, yeah, I don't want to wish that experience on my child or anything like that. However, that situation was a perfect storm for me. It created me. I'm like so highly driven. I am highly empowered. I take action. I don't wait for people to give me things. It actually heightened my sense of empathy, right? Like it basically created this pathway for me that led me to where I am now. And I absolutely love my life. My life is one that I've created by design, and it wasn't handed to me on a platter, right? Everyone has these like hardships that they go through. And as soon as you can see why all of this stuff had to happen to bring us to these moments, that's like the big aha, because our health journey is a spiritual journey, right? So all of these things had to happen for me in my life in order to prime me to become who I am now. And that's part of that superhero story. And like I have some mentors and they shared their victim story. And I was like, wow, that is a major victim story. And they are like doing amazing work in the world. They are not impacted on the day to day by these situations because they have healed that. They have allowed that emotion to move through them. Right. The other thing is like those people that did those horrible things to us or whatever, like whatever that trigger is they're humans. They don't have their shit together either, right? They were doing the best, even if they were doing a bad thing, they were doing what literally all that they were capable of in that moment, right? And so we get to heal that for ourselves so that we can move forward and we can allow the energy to flow in us, because there is not going to be a free flow of energy into our organ systems, into like any area of our body, as long as there's that emotional stagnation. The emotional stagnation causes a physical stagnation. So in terms of what I would recommend, that's just one obviously little exercise, but yeah, like somatic therapy. I mean, for me, coaching, I'm like a huge advocate of like like finding a good coach, obviously, but coaching has been, especially transformational coaching, has been really, really pivotal in my life. It's something I've brought into my programs as a result, because I think it's really, really powerful. Also, doing things like, I know I'm on this whole Dr. Joel, what's his name now? I'm forgetting his name. Dr. Joel, I'm forgetting his name. My God. Of course, right now I'm forgetting his name. Anyways, I'll remember it in just a second, you guys. But meditations that allow you to rewire your brain, things like anything that helps you rewire your brain, right? Takes you out of flight or fight. Because that's the other thing. When you've had past traumas, you basically are living in flight or fight all the time. There's like been so much research around autoimmune disorders and childhood trauma. So it's imperative, if you want to heal, to actually be addressing that aspect. Okay. What imbalance is associated with alcoholism? So Mary, do you want to clarify what you mean? Don't quite understand in terms of what do you mean by imbalance? You still there? The seasonal imbalance. Okay. Well, alcohol is associated, we would say it's kind of, yeah, alcohol is kind of more wood, right? It's associated with the liver and the gallbladder. Um, so, that's why you see anger kind of associated with alcoholism, due to the effects it has on the liver. But again, we like to put things in boxes, but nothing ever clearly fits into a clear box as we'd like. So someone might, have unresolved grief that impacts their decision to drink. I can't say that it's like anger that causes someone to drink, but if someone is an alcoholic, it's going to negatively impact it's going to negatively impact every area. Because if you think about gut health, or like, spleen, it negatively impacts digestion and all that. But I would say mostly the liver and the gallbladder, which is the wood element. Any other questions? I love questions. I've got another few minutes here. Does someone want to share maybe what they've got going on, and we can kind of dive into it a little? It's kind of fun. No? Here we go. Cystic acne, that's a good one. All right, so cystic acne. I'm going to tell you from personal experience, because that was my thing, Amy. And you can kind of see if it resonates with you. But as I said, acne, like skin disorders, are associated with the metal element. So what's interesting is, let's just go back to this image again. So you see the metal element here, it's the white. Well, the earth element is the mother of metal, okay? In order to have a healthy child, you have to have a healthy mother. That's the basis of Chinese medicine too. If you want to treat the child, you treat the mother. So when you're thinking about acne, it's a metal imbalance. So you want to be addressing lung and large intestine, and you also want to be addressing earth, okay? So gut health is imperative. It's more, I would say it's more important than hormones, because you're not going to have balanced hormones if you have an imbalance in your gut microbiome, okay? Because you'll have leaky gut. I don't know about you, but I also had a history of chronic lung stuff. Like I'd get colds a lot, bronchitis, that sort of thing, and my skin would get way worse when that happened. What's interesting, and you can, tell me if this resonates for you, but when my skin would break out, I would feel low self-worth. Like it would impact the way that I felt about myself, which was why it was such a driving thing for me, right? So part of the process, like if you obviously need to do both ends. This is what I do with my work with clients, is like we don't just address only the emotions. We also address the physical, right? It's like 5D meets 3D. It's like body, mind, spirit. You got to do all of them. However, if you're only doing the physical part and you're not doing the internal work, I think that the results are limited. So yeah, it's like the gut healing. It's making sure you're addressing that, but then also it's starting to turn inward and realize that you are completely worthy. You're worthy right now with spots on your skin. So this was a big turnaround for me. My Sage's dad, my partner, he's British, and they don't call it acne, and they don't call it zits. They call it spots. And for me, like he'd be like, "Oh, you just got some spots." Like it took down like this charge I had around these blemishes, right? And I think for you, like it's really realizing that you are worthy, you are beautiful, and like all of that, even with the spots. And you get to also kind of look and see what's going on internally. But I would imagine there's some self-worth stuff happening. Let me know if, let me see. Amy says, I've been wanting to do gut tests, but not sure where to start. GI mapping, SIBO testing. Yeah, so it's hard to say like now, because we're in such a small time window. If it's something you want to dig deeper into, you're more than welcome to send an email to support@flowingelements.com and set up a time to talk to me, and I can help you kind of map out what your next steps should be. But actually, I think like doing a metabolic assessment and finding where your weak spots would be like the first step. And then you'll know what testing you might need. Okay. So Anonymous says, I am doing a brain retraining program, consistently continue to struggle with anxious thoughts and patterns of stress. Have struggled with my whole life. Any suggestions? I've tried a lot. So if you're doing like the work, like you're meditating daily and you're doing Joe Dispenza, there we go, you guys. Why couldn't I remember that? So for me, these meditations with Joe Dispenza, oh, my butt's starting to hurt. Sorry, I'm on this like unpadded chair. These meditations with Joe Dispenza are like so expansive, because they take me out of my body. I don't need to be more in my body. I'm like hyper aware of every little thing that goes on in my body. I feel like there's two types of people in the world, right? There's the people that are like not in tune with their body, and then there's the people that are like overly in tune with their body, right? And we need balance, right? So for me, because I'm overly in tune with my body, it's like expansive, and it releases me of that when I actually do things that take me out of that body experience. And so his meditations I just did the training, this I think it's called Becoming Supernatural. It's on Gaia, if you guys are familiar with that. And his meditations on that were so transformative for me. I've been doing them twice a day. I love them because they take me out of this physical experience into what's beyond, right? And so if you're doing that work already, right? If you're already trying that aspect and you're taking yourself out of the physical body, I would say anxiety often is an inflammatory issue, right? So it maybe not be an emotional thing. It might actually have a physiological thing happening as well, which can be tied to anxiety is related to the um, earth element, right? Which is essentially digestion and gut health. And when we have issues in digestion and gut health, we're going to have inflammation in the brain. And anxiety and depression are signs of inflammation in the brain. So there could be issues in neurotransmitters and that sort of thing. I am a recovered like panic attacker, you guys. Like if you think you've had some problems, like I've had a lot of problems and I know what's possible in your health. Like you can heal so much, right? I don't get anxiety anymore. I get a little nervous or like tense before things, like if I think something's really important, but I think that's human, right? Versus in the past, like I remember one year going to like a 4th of July party and I was so hyper vigilant in my body at the time that the fireworks gave me a panic attack. I was like a dog. It's bad. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Okay, so Mary says, I recently stopped drinking and I want to heal my leaky gut. Yeah, Mary, good job. Heal the leaky gut because drinking does promote it. Let's see. Elaine says, chronic low back, right leg pain. So the low back, right leg, I mean, again, nothing I'm saying is diagnostic, you guys. I'm just teaching you, okay? I am not diagnosing you, but low back is associated with the water element. So, I mean, obviously there could be physiological things, inflammation, that sort of thing. But if we're just talking about emotions, digging deeper into the water element, so fear, lack of trust, faith, right? I know for me, this is so spot on. When something is not right, like if I'm making a big life choice that is not aligned with my deeper self, my sacrum goes out like bad, like where I cannot stand up straight, right? And our body speaks to us in that way. So if you're doing things like to decrease inflammation, you're doing, core exercises, you're, opening the piriformis and the, hip flexors and all that, and you still have those, I would start looking into what kind of fear are you still holding on to? Amy says, interesting. I had a neglectful mom. Yes, totally low self-worth. Yeah. So Amy, this is the thing. So again, we get to reclaim ourselves here. Like none of us ever, and you realize this, I don't know if you have children, but when you become a parent as well, you realize, oh shit, like there's no way I can be a perfect parent. I mean, I've tried, trust me, I've tried to be a perfect parent and I'm probably pretty close. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm sure I'm screwing up my child plenty because I know that I'm not meeting every single need that he feels he has, right? So there's like obviously a spectrum of neglect. There's like a spectrum of getting our needs met. But part of our evolution as human beings and as adults is taking the responsibility of becoming our own mother, right? And actually nurturing ourselves the way that we need to be nurtured. So that would be a huge step as well, of like letting go of the resentments of how you were not given what you needed in early life and know that you can do it for yourself now. And that's really a powerful thing. Okay. Mary says, I have asthma now and hypothyroidism as a result of leaky gut. Yeah. So those are all connected, right? So we can see here, as I mentioned, hypothyroidism can be, it's what we consider a chi deficiency. So it could be related to the earth or water element. And you're seeing this connection here. Well, let's go back to that share, you guys, of earth, metal, water, right? So you've got the asthma here in the metal. And then you've got this connection here between the earth and the water with the hypothyroidism, and these are all related to the gut health, right? So yeah, I love Chinese medicine. These are so ahead of their time, right? Okay, Margaret says, what emotions are involved in food and environmental allergies? I don't think, Margaret, that there is an emotion associated with it. Obviously, there might be emotions that drive food choices, right? And how we're navigating things. But to be honest, for me, if I just think of food and environmental allergies, it's an issue with your gut. You're not going to be able to resolve that purely emotionally unless, you know, your emotions are what's driving you to make poor food choices that perpetuate your gut health issues, right? Or stress, right? You want to be resolving that too. Okay, Heidi. Could grief or anger also come from realizing you may never live pain-free again? Yeah, so anger, so this is how anger happens, you guys. The reason why wood is associated with anger, it's not just wood like a tree, but you can think of a sprout, the sprout coming up out of the earth, right? It comes, that, you know, that energy of the sprout coming up, that's the energy of the wood element. Now, frustration or anger happens when we have that energy and something stops us, right? So in your case, you might have this desire to feel better, right? It's this like motivation, right? It's that upward and outward energy. And there's something that's impairing you, right? Whether that's your physical body or your current reality, could just be a mindset, right? Of like the way that you're seeing it. But you're feeling like this energy isn't allowed to go because of this. Does that make sense? And then anger and frustration happens because it's like, I want this and I'm not able to get it. So yes. However, what I would question for you is a few things. On some level, you know, we can't predict anything. Like I can't say like for certain you can live pain-free. However, there are lots of things that you may not be addressing for your pain. I don't know what you're doing for your pain or not. But I think what is the imperative for anyone on their healing journey is that you're able to trust and surrender into whatever you're experiencing in the moment. Because what if this is your life, right? And not to say it like in a spiraling downward, like depressive way, but at the end of the day, the only time that we have is literally right now. We spin out into the depression and the fear and the anxiety and the anger when we're like forward thinking or backward thinking. And it's really, really imperative that we realize like literally like right now, like now is my life. And so how am I going to align myself into this present moment and live my best life right now, whatever that might be like? And it might not, and that's the only way that you're going to navigate a new future. You can't navigate a new future with control and wanting to create like whatever your projection is. This is where that false sense of control happens. It's actually aligning ourselves into the now. Again, it's experiencing what is. It's not having that contraction, that stagnation around whatever it is, that anger. If you're angry, let yourself be angry. if you're sad, let yourself cry, and then realign, you know, focus on whatever you need to do to feel good. And I understand pain can make things heightened, but, you know, just making sure that you're addressing the full spectrum. Yeah. I don't, I think there's, again, Eastern and Western merge for a reason in the work that I do. It's important to be addressing all aspects, but I would say you're not abnormal, you know? Sucks to feel pain. Okay. Raina says, can you go back over the 5 elements emotional? Raina, sorry, I cannot, only because I have a firm start in 2 minutes, but I'll be sending the replay to everyone. Okay. And then Anonymous, can you talk about polycystic ovary syndrome? Okay, let me just, you know what might actually help me? Because none of this stuff translates exactly over, right? So I'm just going to bring up the signs and symptoms of the polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I can kind of tell you based off of that. Symptoms, what it fits into. So common symptoms are irregular periods, difficulty getting pregnant, excessive hair growth, weight gain, thinning, hair on the head, oily, acne skin. So basically, that would be considered a earth element issue. Okay, so it's almost like an excess condition within the earth element. So again, if we're thinking about what do we need to do in the earth element, you might see emotionally, are you a people pleaser? Do you put other people's needs before your own? So that would be like the emotional aspect you want to be looking at. On a physiological level, gut health is really big for you, okay? Because that is the importance of the digestion there. All right, you guys, I think that's all because I've got a firm ending. If there's any one last question, I could answer it. But other than that, it was fun. I'm so glad you guys joined me. And Ashley, best resources for healing the gut. Honestly, healing your gut is very, I can't give you a resource. It's very individualistic. It's not, I know people like these cookie cutter approaches, but if you do it that way, you're not going to actually have lasting healing, gut healing. You know, you could Google gut healing and find a ton of information that way. But the way that I work with clients to heal their gut is actually doing lab work to identify what's causing their imbalance. So, you know, that again is very specific to questionnaires that help identify what lab work needs to be done. So I would say investing in someone who's a gut health expert is going to be your best choice. Otherwise, you might be on a very long, long journey. All right, guys, had fun. Oh, hold on, there's one more Q&A. Thank you. Yep, thank you too. And anyone that missed the very beginning, you'll get a replay soon. Okay, bye.